Hey, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on what time zone you're in. I'm Charlie Fink. I'm here to do a webinar on content creation inside of VR with Inga Petryaevskaya. Maybe I was close there. She is the founder and CEO of ShapesXR. And Oluwaseyi Sosanya, he is the co-founder and CEO of Gravity Sketch. I'm assuming that most of you on this listening to this webinar have an interest in spatial design or product design or whatever aspect you might use these online tools to help with your workflows. So before we get started, let's set the stage or provide a little context. So if you're not familiar with these tools, we'll show a short video explaining how they're being used and the company's positioning and so forth. So Inga, ladies first, let's take a look at ShapesXR and run that video.
Thank you, Charlie. Magic happens and video starts.
And
there we are.
I hope there is sound as well.
Yeah, I know the sound is very snazzy too. Some great effort was expended to make the sound great.
Yeah, but I can talk over it, right?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah, it'd be great to hear.
Basically, this is collaborative design and prototyping tool, and it's perfectly integrates to different pipelines, whatever tools you use today. That could be Unity as engine or Figma for UI design or UX. The major DNA of Shapes is actually storytelling and prototyping. It can be linear on stages, or it can be interactive prototypes. And this is, I think, how we distinguish us also from Gravity Sketch. You can build incredible models there, bring them in ShapesXR, and then build interactive prototypes and run user tests and explore design in action with animation or interaction triggers. You can design in mixed reality or for augmented reality as well, as we simulate the field of view. And that's pretty powerful for MR design. And again, you can collaborate and even in mixed reality together with shared spatial anchors. And you can build digital twins of your physical space and then bring this in ShapesXR and add digital objects on top of your actual physical space. And here we play a video that talks about our client, Logitech. And Logitech was using Shapes for real-world design. They were designing a game conference that physically took place in Berlin last year. And they designed the venues and environment. So they collaborated. And the power of that was the fact that they could step into the stage that did not exist in the real world. So they also invited their sponsors who could step into this space that they later on built in real world. So, and explore it at actual human scale. And the whole process was pretty iterative and very magical to them. Yeah, so this is the video and introduction of Shapes. Thank you, Charlie.
That's great. So let's keep going and take a look at Gravity Sketch.
Yeah, so Gravity Sketch is a 3D design platform, allows you to quickly and fluidly create content in 3D, but you're also able to invite your colleagues into the space with you and other stakeholders to evaluate designs or do almost like a 3D showroom. This has been super helpful for transportation companies as well as footwear and apparel companies who are looking to embrace the creative intent all the way through the design journey so that the final product reflects what the designers initially intended. Oftentimes there's lots of compromises because of the mediums that you're working with, and the clock is always ticking, right? And so by the time that you're able to submit the design, you may not be able to tweak and manipulate and get all the feedback that you need to bring the product to life exactly as the designer intended. And so what we're seeing across all of the companies that we're working with is they're having conversations around feasibility, sustainability, and general aesthetic a lot earlier in the process with a lot more stakeholders that have a mutual say in what happens. And so what you're seeing here is us working directly with factory partners to generate shoes in less than a week when it takes multiple months to get samples and feedback from factory partners abroad. So on the creative side of things, it works very similar to how you might sketch on pen and paper, except for you have this third dimension. So you can get really fluid and creative in your process, and then you can start refining the model with surfacing tools, and then ultimately you can export that data and bring it downstream into other tools for rendering or for further development in a CAD platform that may be more suitable for the technical counterpart that you work with.
Great, great. Well, those are two great examples of use cases for the app. I don't know how well people could see what was going on in some of the demos, particularly for ShapesXR, but let me give Shapes, before we get started, my own personal endorsement, because many of my students are non-coders, but they still want to work in a game engine. They still want to work in 3D, and they were able to make elaborate interactive storyboards that could be reviewed by myself and their classmates while inside of the simulation. It is a very powerful and relatively easy to use. She could draw, but she couldn't code. So ShapesXR was a really, really good platform for that particular student. And then I also want to give an endorsement to Gravity Sketch. As I explained when we were green rooming the panel, my niece is a product designer, and she loves Gravity Sketch, and apparently she and others have been using it at Pratt, which is one of the leading art schools in the United States. So we're talking about two companies that have provided substantial and immediate value to users of the Quest. So the first question is maybe Inga, you can jump in here. Is it available on any other platforms, and is it compatible with PCs or VR only?
So right now it's mobile VR only, which is Quest 1, Quest 2, and Quest Pro. So we are coming on additional VR platforms like Picker soon, and also AR platform like Magic Leap, and getting ready for Vision Pro, which is also, let's say, a VR platform. So that's that. We also have the web viewer, so you can share via web, but creation is happening in VR.
Say, same question.
Yeah, we're available on Quest 2, Quest 1, Pico, HTC Vive, pretty much all the tethered devices. So all the Windows tethered devices that you would have, as well as I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's kind of an outlier. It's mainly the 6 Degrees of Freedom headsets, but most of our user base is on the Oculus or the Meta Quest products, and then we have a lot of our day one early users who are still very diehard are tethered to PC, and they get a lot more performance boost out of that. So we have to obviously, depreciate the quality of the imagery when you have a mobile GPU versus a GPU that's part of the PC.
Yeah, and I imagine the most sort of hardcore designers who have experience with it are going to prefer the tethered version. Even though obviously you need a very, very expensive PC to run it, presumably designers have those kinds of machines. So I could easily see why people would prefer the Windows platform. Inga, you brought up Apple. Right, it's all we've been talking about for the past 2 weeks. It's kind of fun to speculate. I know they have a very easy interface to develop from on Unity. So obviously that's an investment that you're making, right? Because the thing has a street date of 2024, June probably, I'm told. And the first adopters, although the first adopters may be a lot of developers and professionals. So it's going to take a while before an app as powerful and complicated as ShapesXR ends up on the Apple device. So that's a pretty substantial investment. You're really thinking far into the future on this. What else can you tell us about your roadmap and your plans for 2024 and where we're headed with your tools?
Yes, thank you for this question. And June, by the way, is a new information for me. For some reason, I was expecting a little bit earlier. Our overall,
I think that may have been a pre-sale date, and that may have been a delivery date, not a sale date. And that information came from the internets. And I only read it in one place. So I'm just qualifying that I heard that information yesterday or the day before. So I'm not. I don't.
But it doesn't matter. They already announced, and
right.
this
They
is what
announced it, and if
really matters.
Right. If it's February or June at this point, what's the difference?
Already doesn't matter after so many years of waiting. So for our team, you know, at ShapesXR, 100% Apple entering the market is about creation of completely new market. So we know that MetaQuest is such a heavy focus on gaming, which is perfect. And, you know, VR games using shapes to design interfaces, do level design for games. But what Apple is doing, they say, we are focusing on spatial apps, which are productivity apps, entertainment, and definitely immediately Apple raises the bar for design, right? So they say that everything has to look beautiful, has to be, you know, like we care about design. So they invite all those professionals to join the space and start designing spatial apps, which is, of course, is a huge value for Shapes.
That's a really interesting point. So the developers of the apps who jump onto the Apple platform early, and you know, obviously designers always want the best equipment. They tend to lean into Apple in particular. And so what you're saying is those are the people who need ShapesXR.
Right.
So the first adopter people are actually your people.
Exactly. So it was not like that with Meta platform, right? So because you can still do like, you know, just development in Unity and do some very basic design for UI and explore user journeys. So with Apple, we expect, you know, crowds of professional designers who love to build beautiful products. Now they have to build spatial products. So what is the difference? What are the new requirements for interfaces, you know, for user journey? And I think that eventually they will all try to build magic. And magic is something that we keep repeating. Like, you know, spatial computing can bring so much magic in how we interact with digital assets. And Shapes is just a great platform to explore where magic can happen, where wow effect could happen. So for us, again, it's a huge and very important milestone because it's the right market. It's creation of new productivity, entertainment, design market. And I keep saying that what for Figma was important, like the mobile phone, right? So because so many designers joined the space, starting to build for the iPhone, right? And design matters. So the same is now should happen for spatial computing and ShapesXR, hopefully. So that's the vision.
Do you have the same outlook, say that those first adopters of the Vision Pro, people $5,000 for a headset, these are the kinds of people who pay Apple $5,000 for a monitor? So I think they're also, as Inga is saying, going to be your people, and they're going to use Gravity Sketch to be among the first creators for that actual platform.
Well, what I like about the platform, or at least the positioning, is that they very much looked into productivity, and there wasn't much mention of gaming. When we look at Apple as a brand, and I look at our customer base, a large portion of our customer base has Apple in their professional setting, the Apple devices. But what is also important to think about and consider here is they also have Wacom Cintiqs in their environment. Now, the Cintiq is a digital tablet.
Say that again. Those are new words to me.
The Wacom Cintiq, it's a digital tablet for sketching and authoring, right?
Oh, that's what you call that. Okay.
Yeah, and so those devices, those can run anywhere from the 2,500 to 37, 4,000, right? So, you know, that device is almost on par with the Vision Pro device. And, you know, what's really, I guess Apple's really setting us up for is like building a platform. They're building a platform so that we can build an ecosystem of products around it. And if you look at what happened with the iPhone, it took a while for, you know, the App Store to mature and start building tools for it. And now I can't even think of hosting a meeting without, you know, using my phone to join or sending my invites, you know, directly from the phone on the tube or something like this. So I think, you know, they're looking at a very pragmatic way of getting it into people's hands that are actually doing real world work. And what Inga and myself have been focusing on for the past few years is really helping people get real world work done in this environment.
We've got a lot of great questions coming in of a technical nature. So why don't we get just one or two more business positioning questions out of the way, and then we'll get to these. They're a little more technical, which is great because, as I said, these are your people and those who will benefit the most. I will say, I do completely agree that they're positioning this as a media consumption device, as Say pointed out, a productivity device. That's what they emphasized. Maybe because they don't have much of the other stuff yet. You could see a lot of applications. They were a little light on explaining that, but clearly they are thinking that this is going to be something used professionally by designers, by people who have a big Apple ecosystem around them already. So if you're designing on in an Apple environment, I no doubt the headset's going to fit right into that. Again, not enough about that in the presentation to me, but they were making that for public consumption and for people buying the stock, and not necessarily for people who are designers or as deeply into the industry as we are, because we're talking now about the inside baseball. So let me just ask about business model. Because I know Inga and Say, so many people are sort of using it on the freemium level, but where does the rubber meet the road in your businesses? Where do you start to make money? Who are the paying customers?
Who should kick off?
Oh, whoever. It's a question.
You started monetizing earlier, Shay, so you start.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So we're a free product on all the app stores, and we have an enterprise tier. So right now, the main distinguisher between free and enterprise is the infrastructure that we provide to the enterprise customers for like single sign-on, security, as well as storage and extended collaboration functionality. Essentially, the services that we end up paying for ourselves through AWS and other tools that we use, as well as just making sure that we take on any indemnities and certain liabilities for our software in terms of making sure that things are safe to use. We primarily focus on Fortune 500 companies that have pretty large design teams, and where design is part of the key selling proposition to their final product. So when we look at vehicles, it's nothing but a sculpture on wheels in a lot of cases. It's a beautiful sculpture on wheels, but it is intrinsically an extension of your socioeconomic status and who you are as an individual. And so you make those decisions based on how it looks and feels and how it makes you feel. And these companies invest a tremendous amount of money into that. And so we help them maintain design intent throughout the design journey through collaboration functionality, as well as a suite of creation tools. On the free side, this is where your niece and students are really bringing it into their workflow, and they may not need every single feature that the enterprise version has. And so we want to make sure that we offer a tier that's accessible for as long as possible to this user base.
Sure. And those students are going to go to work for those larger design teams, and they'll hopefully take their tools with them. Inga, what about ShapesXR?
Yeah, so we also launched the free version on store, and we want to keep our fully functional free version for, I want to say forever, but then this webinar will be recorded and will be in internet forever. Because we want to be the industry standard, right? For UI, UX designers, for spatial design. And when actually spatial is not just spatial, meaning VR, AR, but spatial meaning that there is literally a big space or environment, probably also in the real world. And we have to interact with the space around us and explore it. We only introduced our studio and enterprise versions several months ago. And studios, like smaller teams, like startups, are very important for us, because all those titles on store XR teams is our immediate market, right? Companies like FitXR, Trip, Nanarm are among our clients who actually build their own VR apps, whether that's fitness or meditation or drug discovery and stuff like that. They still have to design, right, their products, and we call them studios. And I think eventually all titles on store should start designing spatially and also have some mixed reality mode. But we also focus on enterprises, same as Fortune 2000 companies, I would say. And right now, more likely to have just people who come to us because we just start monetizing. Logitech, that I mentioned, was one of the early clients, paying client to ShapesXR. And the beauty of that use case is that it actually was XR team that started to use Shapes. I mean, VR trainings, immediate use case. But then they ended up using it for real world design, for stages and environments and stuff like that. And I actually promised, I think on my LinkedIn post to the audience, that we will talk about some metrics and return of investment. So I'm happy to do that if you think this is the right moment to.
Sure, go ahead. Well, this is kind of a free-flowing conversation. I'm not going down a list
Yeah.
of questions. I'm just talking to two friends.
Yes. So that then I don't get all those comments. So what were the numbers and, metrics and stuff like that, and then give the word to Shay. So with Logitech, again, like why to do that in VR? Why to design those kind of game environments in Shape? So overall, the process was like 5 times faster on iterations, because prior to that, they would do just a cinematic in Unity and create some rendered images to impress sponsors to join the event and sponsor companies like McLaren or Puma. But what they built in Shapes, overall, it took them 3 weeks to build lots of venues at human scale and invite those companies inside in VR and step into that and explore it at 1:1 scale. And also to come up with the cost per production, because then they physically build that in Berlin, as kind of was very powerful. Another example would be, for example, company like Mondelez, which is a favorite food brand for hopefully many people. I'm not the only sweetheart here. And so the way they are, using Shapes, and the kind of the metric is that they wanted to explore the premium packaging. So how can you do that? You can write a software like to discover that, and then involve software developers, people from R&D center. But if you're just a marketing team, you can also do it by, building that with simple animation and stages in Shapes, and invite other people, and then bring the digital twin of the actual physical store and assemble products like Milka chocolate or Oreo inside that store, and invite everyone to explore that. And this is super, super iterative process. And it just saves lots of money, because you don't need to involve developers, and you don't need to involve, expensive people. And some example that really inspires me as well from real world, I would say, is Upsurgeon. This is an incredible company that is building physical props for surgeons, neurosurgeons, that actually they were 3D printing assets like brain and spine elements. And then people who were doing training to become surgeons, they had to assemble that. So they were wasting lots of money and time on 3D printing, because to 3D print a part, a piece, it's very time-consuming process, but it's also expensive. So now they meet in Shapes, and just like Lego blocks, they build those assembled parts and physical props. And the beauty of VR is that you can zoom into the brain, and you can be a tiny fly, and you can explore it, and it's very, very powerful. And only once this kind of design is done in Shapes, only after that they start to 3D print. And this is tremendous saving of from weeks and months to really days, and also the way to get inside the brain or inside the spine and zoom in is very, very powerful. So that's like, again, it's not just the speed of design, it's the number of iterations. First of all, whether you do XR or real world. It's also huge saving on the fact that you can involve people with no 3D skills, and you only implement or produce. I mean, you can 3D print physical product, or you can implement the new VR game, but you only implement and produce validated idea that you already had a chance to use a test with your audience. And this is already happening today. And I think that we wanted to inspire people that, I mean, you don't have to wait for next generations of Apple Vision Pro or wait another year. I think it's really the time to stop napping on this tech and get inspired by other companies, because they already really utilize it for very, very practical tasks.
Say, did you have anything you wanted to add to what Inga just shared?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds very similar in terms of use case. I mean, obviously, when you're in a spatial environment, you could be at any scale you want, and that's extremely powerful.
I'm glad you brought up scaling, because what I tell my students is design small, review big, right? So you can get down to the microscopic level, and then when you zoom back to the proper size, now you've got something that's very high resolution and very fine, with fine detail, that would have been very hard to have inside the model if you were designing it at the ultimate viewing scale. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the benefits of Gravity Sketch too.
Absolutely. I mean, there's two big facets that we find across all of our customers, and we're talking about folks like Ford to New Balance. And the big ones are time to market, right? Everyone wants to get their product to market, and they want to get their product to market in a way that, of course, as I said many times now, preserves the integrity of the design's initial intent. But in addition to that, it's really about this communication flow and speed of creativity, right? And what we're seeing is you're either getting faster through your journey of communication, or you're becoming more expressive and more creative with your initial design intent. And so some of the numbers that we've pulled is 10x the number of concepts that they were able to create in the existing workflow. So they can actually 10x the number of concepts that they review, or a 60% reduction in man hours. Now, we look at both of these industries that we service at the moment. Footwear, you're making samples in Asia somewhere, right? One of the development centers there. And you're waiting for those samples to be shipped across the globe back and forth. And so sometimes decisions need to take weeks, if not multiple weeks, to be made and executed upon. And in automotive and transportation design, you're milling clay, physical clay, to get a one-to-one representation of this model. Now, we don't necessarily think these things are going to go away, but what we do see is that they're getting much more, I think, much more towards a one shot, one kill kind of environment, where they're creating stuff that they felt like exactly what was seen in the screen or in the virtual screen is now being shown on the floor in front of them. And they don't have to do so many iterations of that, because those are labor intensive as well as cost intensive. And what that allows them to do is obviously refine some of the things that they may not have been able to refine when they were working in the old method, because they were running out of time. You know, the clock is against you as a designer at any given time. The organization needs to release the next season or the next year vehicle. So for us, we're seeing these real world practical applications taking place today. And we didn't introduce this technology to our automotive customers and our transportation customers. They were already doing review in VR, but it was happening at the very tail end. After they had done all the design work, all the CAD modeling, they'd made all the compromises. They were then reviewing different colorways or different material finishes and things like this, which has been a massive tool for them for many years. But what we were able to help them do is bring a lot of those conversations where there's still malleability in the design and there's still malleability in the direction. And I think what ultimately I'm seeing is that there's this more collaborative nature between these very polar groups in an organization, being engineering and design. And what we're seeing is that although initially they were speaking the same language, they're speaking different dialects. And now what we're seeing is those two languages, which is 3D, is now becoming one within the virtual space. And that ultimately is going to make a happier environment for everyone. And they're just going to have more fun doing the work that they're doing on a day-to-day basis.
I think you're really hitting a pain point that I have always experienced or observed as an executive, which is that we as people who are business owners inside an organization, as well as the marketing and design team, which is always kind of mishmashed together, bring projects usually with some detailed written explanation of what the developers are looking for. And the developers never fail to come back with a long list of questions and stuff that you didn't understand. You were asking them to make this choice, right? So, they always come back with a long document. And, usually there's, a dozen or dozens of things that need to be clarified before they really can start writing it. And I think here's an opportunity really to get them into the process early, and also to have the process shown to them visually instead of having them to interpret a written document, which has its own conceptual challenges because it is 2D, not 3D. And so you're asking people to envision in their head what's in your head. And so this is a very tedious process that I think could be hugely expedited, either for product reviews or storyboards, for level design, for a game or a commercial, or almost any 3D application that an enterprise would take on. So this has been a great 10,000 foot conversation, but I don't want to get too sidetracked there, because again, I think that we have highly technical people on this call who are asking really good questions that I would never get to. So since they are the beneficiaries of this, let's pivot around and start handling these, because the other thing about these questions is this is not the usual 10-minute Q&A that comes after a panel. So it may take us the better part of our remaining 25 minutes just to hit on most of them. So I'll start on this one. And again, it's really to both of you or whoever wants to jump in first. Could you explain a little about how the application development process was in terms of forming the work team and obtaining the necessary resources, hardware, money, marketing strategy, etc., to have a product in required time? From Danny Chavez. Thank you, Danny.
Now, is Danny, is this with respect to our particular products that we're developing, or is it with respect to the end?
Oh,
No, it's not a totally clear question, Danny. So if you could just put it up in the chat, we'll get back to it in 1 second. Is ShapesXR like, I should have asked this question, Inga. Is ShapesXR like Microsoft Maquette? Will it be supporting tethered devices on PC VR? So this is somebody who may have missed that first explanation.
Do you see who is asking that question now?
No.
Yeah, because I mean, we do get this question from time to time, and as Shay said, that definitely when your headset is tethered to a gaming creative PC with a great video card, then you have a blast. You can have shadows, you can have different sources of light, you can have a variety of different shaders and materials that really make your design look juicy and great. And Maquette here is an amazing example. So we understand the beauty and power of this real-time co-creation, staying low poly so that you don't really afraid to keep, throwing away stuff. You iterate like crazy, and it's really about like rapid prototyping. But some designers use shapes, and it covers a big portion of the pipeline. They actually build UIs, interfaces for their games, for example, and definitely they want to have more power, and they want to rely on the power of the computational power of the PC. So we do plan, and I'm so sorry, we do use the tethered version of Shapes ourselves internally. So for some, fancy things here and there. And that's why, yes, we do think that it's the right move for us to have this option for power users to have the, I don't expect it's a huge market, because we used to start from tethered VR, back in time. And then always the complaint was, I can't afford like 1080 video card those days, it's like, to have this gaming creative PC. But we do have a cohort of users who really need it. And of course, we want to enable them to work at high fidelity. So the answer is yes, Maquette is definitely a great example. And we do consider a PC tethered version at some point.
Do Gravity Sketch and Shapes work together? Can you share a file from one to another? How does that work? You download it?
100%.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
you can download a model from Gravity Sketch and then import with two ShapesXR, no problem. Yeah. Gotcha. And you should do that. And we definitely have users who do that, who model in Gravity Sketch and then bring those models to Shapes, build the world around, and then add interactivity and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's an immersive workflow that's developing, and I think that's really exciting to see, like, tools working in harmony together, just like you would work on your desktop. And that will come into full swing in a very short few years, especially with some of these bigger players like Apple getting into the game.
Gravity Sketch, here's a good question and a nice little compliment for you. Gravity Sketch is fantastic and part of my pipeline, but will your future roadmap also develop a sculpting app like Medium, ShapeLab, Gravity Sculpty?
No, I love this question, and we get it a lot. Ultimately, there's two elements of Gravity Sketch. There's the collaboration element, and then there's the creation element. And we're always trying to balance these two in terms of our investment. So at the moment, we've gone really deeply into polygon modeling, which is akin to a Blender type of workflow. But we are introducing new technologies for modeling every single day, from some of the polygon modeling that some of the primitive modeling that we're doing, to textured brushes, to just improving the way that you can manipulate geometry. all long-winded answer ultimately is say, yes, we have investigated into this stuff and we will bring some form of that in the future. When that comes and how we prioritize that is ultimately the challenge. Both Inga and myself we're still in startup mode. It's a very tough space to be working in, especially, just a few months ago, people were saying the whole metaverse is dead. And unfortunately, I don't think we're super tied to it, but we are tied to it in the eyes of people that are investing in the space and people that are really examining the space. So we have to be very, very pragmatic about how we build our businesses and how we develop features. And so I'm not trying to shoot this question down. I want to bring all these features forward.
We live in the real world, and your product pipeline is all about your engineering capacity, and you can't add engineers without more money. And this is an environment where people are keeping their powder dry for AI concepts, and so it isn't a great moment for the metaverse. But as Tim Sweeney said, well, I've got 600 million people here who are celebrating the metaverse, so maybe you're not in the right place to understand what's going on. So and also both things can be true. So it just depends who you are. But Tim Sweeney is right. There are a lot of people spending a lot of time in the 3D virtual worlds that your tools help create. So whatever we call it going forward, that idea of spatial 3D computing, whether it's through a 2D screen or the browser of a mobile phone or a VR headset, is here to stay. So it may be a good thing for the metaverse to kind of quietly move off to the side, where we can develop it into something easier to understand for people who are not going there for gaming. So great segue from your last reflections on your pipeline. Here's a specific question. What's your long-term product vision for Gravity Sketch, especially on the workflow and collaboration aspect?
Yeah, so I tend to think in like short spurts. We have like this big vision, I would say, and we're trying to get to the point where 3D conversations, whiteboarding, collaboration, communication, design all happen in this one kind of immersive environment. But from a short spurt perspective, we see so many inefficiencies in workflow right now. I've spent so much time with some of our companies and some of their factory partners where I see, they're just doing a simple file exchange that has a data loss, or it takes time and weeks to kind of get one piece of feedback from one person to the next. And so ultimately, where our short-term focus is on bringing everyone that sits adjacent to design. So think of design in an organization as the nucleus. And there's a one ring that goes right outside of design, and that's engineering, project management, marketing teams, design directors, and so forth. How do designers or the initial content creator bring in those individuals and to communicate with them around their concepts? And so we've created tools to help them do that from the screen. So someone in virtual reality and someone from the screen can be participating, also maybe from the mobile phone, maybe from the iPad. And what level of creative input do they need? We're investigating that deeply. And ultimately, what we're seeing is a lot of our companies right now are replacing areas in their pipeline where they would be using a WebEx or a Teams or a Zoom with Gravity Sketch, because they're able to actually make edits on the fly, have discussions on the fly, and walk away from these meetings with a lot more direction. It's a much more fruitful conversation when they're able to have really deep, meaningful, impactful decisions made on the fly. And building that out a lot longer in the next 3 or 4 years, we're going to see this as a backbone of a workflow where tools like Blender can feed into it, and tools like the Adobe Suite can feed into it. And you can just import things into the ecosystem and work really fluidly from various stakeholders. And so that last concentric circle is something like a retail partner. Now, if you're a vehicle manufacturer, you want to make sure, or even a footwear manufacturer, you want to make sure that your retail partners, whether it be the car lot or Foot Locker, have a very good understanding of what products can come to the market in the next season or the next year. And so you can present directly in a 3D environment, maybe even put it on the showroom floor for them and have them evaluate the product colorways, the style, the fit, the finish. And those things are going to be very, very fluid to do in a virtual environment. And hopefully they're going to drive better business relationships with partners across the customer base to the kind of the end point where the individual customers are going to purchase these products. And I think collaboration is the pulse but creation is also a key vehicle to getting to that vision. I don't know if that sounds ambiguous, but hopefully that gives a little bit of color of where we're going.
Well, I think it's most meaningful to the people who do this kind of work every day. Inga, here's a related question that I think probably dovetails nicely with your long experience building productivity tools even before ShapesXR. So what currently are the 2D business processes that you think could benefit from being in 3D? For example, do you think people may be doing data analysis in 3D instead of using Microsoft Excel, or doing presentations in 3D, presumably on a platform like ShapesXR instead of PowerPoint? Thank you, Amal, for that excellent question.
Yeah, so this is indeed a great question, and
because you've said to me that you think of Shapes as the Figma of XR. So this sort of dovetails right into that, right?
With limitation of the current mobile headset, probably it's interesting. So Shapes is being used by several big four consulting firms who work with their end clients. And all of them, they say that ShapesXR is immersive PowerPoint to them. They do not say Figma because they use Shapes as pre-sales tool. And it basically means that you meet your client. For example, imagine you are Accenture and you meet your client and you discuss some future product or something, right? I mean, back in time, you would build a futuristic PowerPoint deck with some rendered whatever images from whatever you find in the internet, like slightly related, and then you will meet on Zoom and pitch it, like imagine this is like this and that. So what you can do right now, you can build immersive presentation in Shapes and move people from looking at slides to experiencing the product that does not exist, and bring your client inside so they actually step into this experience together with you. So for any physical product, I mean, physical 3D product, whether that's, new robot arm or new watches, like Armani, for example, and the Metaverse working with Armani, they're exploring like, what else we can do about these luxury things. Instead of building a PowerPoint presentation, you can build a 3D presentation in ShapesXR, and clients usually extremely impressed by the fact that they can impact the design. You don't need any skills. You can impact the design literally because it's so accessible to use. And coming to data exploration, I think there are a bunch of projects already exist that allow you to work with data in VR. And I know several companies that I can name, including, our users and clients, and data, chemistry, and even mathematics, like companies like Prisms and Nanam again. It's all something that has several dimensions, and you need to zoom into that, would benefit dramatically. I mean, we will not replace PowerPoint if you just, need to talk about something, but we will definitely replace PowerPoint with VR and experiences when we have to talk about physical product that have volume, that have, depths, that have actual kind of sizes and also architecture and all that stuff, and at the cost of building a PowerPoint deck. This is super important. It will cost you not more time and not more money to build experience in VR than building a PowerPoint deck, but it will be much more vivid, and you will totally get how it's going to work. So that's for sure.
Yeah, and I'd add to that, like if you think about a PowerPoint presentation, how are you facilitating that? I mean, you're jumping onto a Zoom call and you're having a back and forth with someone, and then on the back of that, or an audience of folks, and on the back of that, you end up with a bunch of tangential one-on-one conversations because you have to kind of go out and make this thing happen, right? And you may not have the right angle, you may not have the right perspective, or let's say you go ahead and share your CAD environment. That's just a snapshot of, something in a very confined box, a window.
Yeah.
And I really struggle to call CAD 3D, and I might be, this might be controversial, but it's called frame rate for a reason, right? You're looking at a frame in space and it's not stereoscopic. So is it actual 3D, or is it just a bunch of slices of images that you're consuming from at a 2D lens?
From a flat screen.
Exactly. Yeah. So once you get into the scale, once you get into stereoscopic view, you're looking at something very similar to how you would evaluate something in the real world. And you can make a much more solid, grounded decision when you're in that space. And that is monumentous compared to looking at a PowerPoint deck with a bunch of isolated views, or even looking at someone's screen share of their CAD system.
So changing it up, Inga, here's another question for you. I think I know the answer, but I'll give this to you anyway. Can you code in ShapesXR? Would it be something like this block style of coding, so it is more physical?
Yeah. So, I mean, I know that many people don't like to say prototyping with no code. So it's not about writing code in C# in Shapes. And if you ever use, for example, Horizon Worlds as an editor, you basically write code to build any interactions, which is amazing because you have control, but not many designers can code. And doing that in VR is also not the most delightful thing. In Shapes right now, we have triggers and interactions when you can kind of code the logic, but it's just like several triggers. And we are going to have more advanced, interactivity system that will have many non-linear relations and many different triggers that you can control, plus animation. So, but it will stay to be very, very accessible, no coding prototyping tool.
So really, like the rest of Shapes, its ultimate destination is a game engine, and there you would substitute more substantial interactivity instructions. Because
we have
again, Shapes are building a prototype, and all the pieces of it ultimately will be replaced with final designs and interactivity and so forth.
We have a plugin with Unity right now, so you can open entire space with all stages in Unity, for example, and it's really just you type the space code and you open it fully in Unity. You can also export that to Unreal if you wish, and then do that, because like the power of Shapes is like initial visualization of the concept and getting aligned on different ideas. So this ideation and body storming, and then building a prototype that you can use a test. And then you only implement the idea that is validated. I still dream about the future when we have super, super powerful spatial computing platform that you can do final things on it, but it will definitely take some time. And then we become fully Figma. We can do final designs. But for that, of course, we need additional resources. I mean, computational power.
Yeah. And this is coming fast. I mean, there's a lot of cloud GPU stuff that's on the horizon. But what I encourage the audience to do is look at these tools. Like, people look at 3D as a final destination because historically it's taken so long to make a 3D mockup, a digital 3D mockup, right? And like, let's start reimagining what 3D can be used for. It should be used for whiteboarding, for a sketch. We can redefine what a sketch is. It doesn't necessarily have to be pen on paper. I mean, the Procreate was able to reimagine it would look like for the iPad. And now that we're moving into this 3D space, just throwing some things into a space and trying to understand the ergonomics, there's so much value there. It doesn't have to be the final thing if it can cut away so many of those residual conversations that would happen if you're using the old methodology. So I really challenge everyone out there to start looking at this as, your first port of call when you're coming up with an idea, as opposed to trying to replace, this very arduous, long, old school CAD program or CAD way of working with CAD. CAD's still going to be there, but you can work much more efficiently once you understand the spatial constraints and the volumetrics and ergonomics behind what you're trying to achieve.
So just to finish up this thought about bringing more substantial, final-ish things into Shapes as a sort of prototyping tool, and how things evolve from a prototype and how they migrate into into a finished piece. So, for example, can you send what you're doing in Unity back to Gravity Sketch and review it and refine it, and then send it back to Unity? So, I think here's a question about how you might use Shapes right after the initial one to further the prototype, right? Can you go back and forth and get the best of both?
This is a great question. So right now, there is no, let's say, very, very smooth way. You can just import it back as a baked thing, which is not definitely something that some users are willing to have. It will be just a baked model out of Unity back to Shapes. And some people still do that because they want to collaboratively explore it. And you can't do that in Unity. I mean, in Unity, everyone explore on their own, they build in a headset and then sending, comments via Slack. And so that's why you can bring that as a model. Jelteyev in Shapes and then explore it all together in Shapes again. But we do plan to have Shapes to have interoperability like always. For example, the reason we have integration with Figma, even though my dream is that people who do spatial design, they start immersed, they do not start in Figma. They have to immerse themselves from step 0 and have this initial ideation and discovery immersively, and then they can do kind of other things. But we have to admit that most of the people use Figma today. So that's why we say, okay, no problem. Just start by viewing your panels, 2D panels in Shapes, and enjoy it and scale it and then synchronize back with Figma. We understand that it's important to have the pipeline. Same with Unity. So we allow you to export to Unity. At some point, we will allow you to import back. You already can do that as a baked model to review together. But again, my dream is, and it's not a question about it, is that any spatial design who claim to be a spatial design, XR design, whoever the title is, whatever the title is, to start from the media you create your app for, like where your user is gonna be, right? And you will be amazed that the ideas and diversity of ideas that you come with will be so different compared to when you start in Figma, you design full in Figma, then you bring this to Shapes to just adjust the scale, adjust curves and stuff like that. It's sometimes not enough. You will be amazed by how many new ideas you will come with. Yeah.
Starting in 3 is our motto, or starting in 3D is our motto as well. Like you're thinking in 3D initially anyways. So why project it into this 2D world? Start in 3D, you're thinking in 3D, and try to finish it in 3D. Try to run the whole process if you can directly 3-dimensionally. And we've seen this amazing use case in one of our automotive customers where the interior designer just sat in a seat within the studio, just an isolated seat, and literally just sketched around him, sketched the whole interior around him, so that he understood all of the ergonomic conditions. He didn't need to have any ergonomic specialists or anything to help him kind of package up stuff and look at it from a CAD perspective. He was just able to feel it out, and then now he can liaison and consult with the technical team to see if what's feasible. But he understood from an ergonomic perspective the driver experience at a sketch level. And you're right, Inga, this completely changes the way you approach the problem that you're trying to solve.
Yeah, I mean, UI designers will probably be complaining that there is no need for 3D UI right now, and 2D UI is probably enough. I mean, I agree. I don't argue with that, even though I still strive for 2.5 or 3D like dApps and kind of things like that. But user journey-wise, it's super important to be immersed. Like we still expect that all new interactions and all new ways how we interact with entire space around us will be invented in the future. But they will be invented spatially, because you have to be there. You have to be comfortable. You have to try different things to come up with some incredible magic. So that's the vision.
Great.
Who's sending those hearts? I mean, participants or you, Charlie?
It's not me, but I could. I'm just nodding. We only have a few minutes left before we get to the top of the hour. So, Say, is there anything in conclusion you want to make sure that we've got a nice group of people here that they understand about Gravity Sketch and where you are and where you're going, and just some final thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like we've only gotten here because we've had companies, end users, community, students believing in this way of working and really leaning into it. And it's not a micro movement. I think it's a really big movement. It's a really substantial one. Some of the biggest brands in the world are kind of getting into this space quite deeply. And we're a complete open door. We've never been like, there's no secret sauce that we're trying to hide. We actually want to spread as much as we can the way and the why and the how our users and our customers are using this technology to gain efficiencies in their workflow. So anytime you want to reach out, anytime you want to chat with us, our Discord is open, our Instagram is open, our YouTube is open, and we're highly collaborative. And it's not just us as a business. I honestly said we're working in conjunction with our community. And like, if you were to post a question or pose an issue or some of the things that you guys are asking here that maybe aren't specific to our roadmap, but maybe to how to gain value from these tools, and not just Gravity Sketch, Shapes and other tools in the space, I'm 100% confident that someone from our community will pipe up and help you through that journey, if not one of us immediately. So please join the community, even if it's as a quote unquote lurker, and just participate. And we're happy to kind of share as much knowledge as we can. I don't think just Shapes and Gravisketch are going to be able to build this space. I think we have to build it with a much bigger audience. And the fact that you're showing up here today, showing interest, I would just encourage everyone to continue that curiosity. And we're here to
I think that's a really good point. If you're committed enough to sit through this hour with us, talking about the ins and outs of spatial design, I think having a relationship with Say or Inga or the people in their teams would benefit you, because this is still a small enough and new enough effort that, as Say pointed out, the users are teaching the builders what they need to be doing. So I think community is a great tool for building that. And I know that you guys are totally committed to that method of iterating your products towards success. So Inga, final thoughts. We've got like 2 minutes remaining.
2 minutes. We do publish case studies with our clients. So if you get inspired by any case study and want to learn more, or even get connected with some of those companies, we can totally do that. There is a lot of education happening on this market. We understand that even though it's been for several years, we're still like at the very early stage, and we are happy to share knowledge, and our clients are happy to share knowledge. And probably next webinar we should do inviting some top brands talking how they use our tool, so that it's very, very practical. And Charlie, look, we are talking for 1 hour and we haven't touched AI. I love it. We haven't even talked about
I was going to bring that up, but then I thought, well, AI, if it's generative AI and it's creating things, well, those things are going to be in a compatible file format, and they can be dragged right into Shapes or into Gravisketch and further refined, just as they would be with a tool like Blender. But instead of looking at a 3D object through a 2D screen, you actually can walk around it. So I think that we're still starting to see the benefits of that. But as I said, it's still the beginning. We don't have an Apple product yet. I think it probably won't be until the end of the decade that Apple really starts generating phone-like headsets that are more accessible to people financially and are filled with apps that they want. Right. Again, right now that headset is for us, insiders and people in the design industry who are going to create those apps. So that's I think why the first device is the way it is. And hopefully over the next year, we'll have many, many more and more popular devices for people to be creating content for. So the content explosion for Spatial is just beginning. So I think that's all the time we have. Thank you guys for inviting me and for listening to us, everybody at home. As I said, if we didn't get to your question, please go to the respective Discords or social media channels. And these are, small companies with people that you can get to know and work with. So don't be bashful. They want to work with you. Thanks again, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you,
all. Yeah. Thank you, Inga. Thank you, Charlie. Yeah. You guys take care.